Good morning, or depending on when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross from PTCGRadio, and I'm back with my third and final game from the Wakefield Win-A-Box from a few weeks ago. Just a quick reminder here that this is in the old format rules, so that is something to bear in mind as we go here. These is the old format before Furious Fist came out and before the rotation. So, on the right there we see UK National Champion Scott Burgess, who is playing a big basics deck based around Landorus. He just attached an energy and pass, he has very little. On the left we see a Litleo active and an Ultra Ball discards a Lysandra and a Juniper, presumably to get a second Litleo. Now, on the left we have a Junior, and I'm not going to name the Junior for privacy and all that, I'm going to call him Phil. His name's not Phil, but we're going to call him Phil because we've got to call him something or else this video is going to get a little bit confusing. So Phil has searched for a Charizard there, and presumably he's got a Juniper in hand, and we can see he has got a Juniper in hand because as a general rule you don't Ultra Ball a Lysandra and a Juniper unless you've got another supporter. Now interestingly, Phil has passed here without actually playing a supporter. He's probably got stuff, maybe Pyroar, etc. in his hand that he doesn't want to get rid of. He can see that Scott's had a fairly slow start, so why kind of waste your time mucking about with, you know, junipering stuff you need, when the chances are you're going to have a turn or two to try and get something out and something rolling. Now Scott plays an Ultra Ball there, and interestingly we see a Metal Energy. Now Scott is playing a big basics deck, like the one that Brandon Salazar played to win US Nationals, but we don't know exactly what's in it. That Metal Energy suggests there may be some kind of Cobalion EX there, which is really good against the Kyurems in TDK, and just really good against anything that plays Special Energy. So there is some use to it having him there. Now Scott searches out a Garbodor, which is obviously going to be key in this matchup. Scott is not going to be able to kill those Pyroars when they come out without Garbodor there, so that makes perfect sense for him to go and get that. And really he needs a Laser Verbank here to get the KO on Litleo, but he misses it, he puts 50 damage on, and the Pyroar comes down. We then see a Pokemon Catcher, with which he hits a Heads, and then the Juniper. So you can see there, Phil played this fantastically. Waiting a turn for the Juniper was absolutely the best thing to do there. He got the Heads on the Catcher, he got the Pyroar down. Had he played the Juniper last turn, he'd have lost both of those cards. So remember, Phil here is a junior, and that was just a spectacular play, identifying that Scott hadn't been able to get anything going last turn, that Scott doesn't have a supporter, so just waiting a turn. And he plays a Rollerblade, with which he hits a Tails, unfortunately. He's got an energy on the Pyroar. But what you see here is that Scott is going to have to hit a Garbodor and a Floatstone, or I suppose a Garbodor Muscle Band switch, in order to get, first of all, the Garbodor out to actually, you know, allow him to hit the Pyroar, and secondly to get the Landorus active. And we know that Scott hasn't played a supporter yet, so Scott doesn't seem to have a hand with loads of good stuff. The fact that Scott played an Ultra Ball last turn and didn't get a Jirachi might suggest that he doesn't play a Jirachi. Oh, and this is a big play from Scott here. This is far from an ideal play. He plays a double colourless down to retreat the Trubbish, and of course he needs to do that. Phil is threatening a KO with that Pyroar the next turn, and if he doesn't get the KO, then if Scott doesn't get the Trubbish out of the active and Scott gets the KO, that's going to lock Scott out of the game unless he gets a second Trubbish and manages to evolve it. So he gets the evolution, but he doesn't get the and Phil hits another Heads off Catcher there. Now he's looking for the DCE here, so that he can get an attack off with that active Pyro. You see he uses a Fiery Torch, and he manages to pull that Garbodor active, which is huge, but he doesn't yet have a Blacksmith or a DCE to start attaching this stuff. So Scott really needs a float zone here. He did get 30 damage onto the Litleo last turn, because of course the Litleo on the bench wasn't protected. Oh, and he hits the DCE there. That Garbodor is still in the active, and Scott is really on the back foot. Now you can argue here that Scott is having very bad luck. He's yet to play a supporter. And he's just going to play the general attack there to do 60, I believe, to that active Garbodor. And that Garbodor is going down next turn. And Scott just has to pass. So unless, that Garbodor is going down. That Garbodor is going to die very easily here. And what Phil really needs to work on here is making sure that he gets those Pyroars out. Now, if he's got one there, if he gets another one out, then Scott can still kill that Charizard. That Charizard doesn't have the protection that Pyroar has. But 2 prizes isn't going to win Scott the game here. So we see a bicycle there. And, Kyle, excuse me, I meant Kyle. I was thinking Kyle. He's not actually called Kyle. He's not called Phil either. Let's just refer to him as a bunch of names. I'll call him whatever I want. If I say Scott, we're talking about the guy on the left. If I say anything else, we're talking about the guy on the right. But Phil gets the KO on the Garbodor there. Not Kyle, although we might as well just call him that, to be honest. He gets the KO on the Garbodor, and Scott's really on the back foot here. Now, the good news is he can still hit the bench Litleo, which is yet to evolve. Although, if I remember correctly, that is the 70 HP Litleo, so it's still not going to be a KO. If he's able to hit a Lysandre or a Catcher, he's going to be able to get the KO there. Oh, and you see Scott plays a dowsing machine. This, if I ever heard it, was an argument for playing... and there's a bicycle from Scott there. Is an argument for playing computer search, because that would have been huge if he could have computer searched for a Juniper there. Now, he's got the dowsing machine. The question here really is, does Scott play Jirachi? If Scott plays Jirachi, then he's going to be able to play the Ultra Ball that he got from the dowsing machine for a supporter, but he doesn't actually need to. He gets the Ultra Ball back in his deck, which is a good play. He's going to want that Ultra Ball to get a Trubbish or to get a Garbodor later on. So he's able to play an N there because he got that off the bicycle. So Scott is off and rolling now, and Phil is going to have a harder time in the game now. But most of these decks, and I don't have Scott's deck list in front of me, I don't know exactly what he's playing, but the likelihood is that Scott is playing a 2-2 Garbodor line. That's fairly standard in these decks, and he's already lost a Trubbish. Now, this is in the days when when Super Rod was legal, and it could be played, but a lot of these big basics decks didn't play Super Rod. So Scott does get a Trubbish down there, but if Phil is able to hit a Catcher or a Lysandre, he's going to be able to get the KO. So Scott plays the Laser, getting the Poison onto the Pyroar. Doesn't have a Verbank in place, so it's only doing 10 between turns, but he does get the 30 on the bench Litleo as well, and that Litleo needs to evolve or it is going to be KO'd by the damage next turn. And unless Scott can get a Garbodor out here, this game is really going to come down basically to... and he plays 2 switches there to get rid of the Poison, and that is lovely. He plays another energy so he can do the big attack, discarding the fire energy to do 90, and still be able to attack next turn, and he even hits ahead on roller skates. Excuse me. So, he's got it all here. Now, what he has to be careful of here is making sure he doesn't bench too much. There's a Mewtwo on the bench, Scott can kill that Mewtwo. There's a Charizard on the bench, Scott can kill that Mewtwo. That Charizard. And when I was talking about Plasma versus Pyro, I did a few videos on this earlier in the season, and I did an article on 6prizes.com along these lines as well. And one of the ways you beat Pyro decks is just to kill other stuff. So Phil needs to be careful here that he doesn't bench so much he actually allows Scott back into the game by giving him other stuff to kill. But at the moment he's alright. Now, the good news for Scott is that third Litleo hasn't evolved. That means that Scott is going to be able to kill that bench Litleo, which is good. Good for Scott anyway. But what it does mean is that there is going to be there's still one prize he needs to take. He can kill that Mewtwo, assuming he can hit a catcher or a Lysand, which is far from a given. We don't know how many Scott is playing, and even so, we don't know if he's going to be able to hit them at the right time. And he can kill that Litleo with base damage, with bench damage. But even if he pulls all of that off, there still needs to be a another KO there. But now we see that Scott's starting to build up a Pikachu, and he gets the KO on that Litleo there. And what Scott is attempting to do here is get a Raichu out. Raichu can hit through Pyroar. And we're essentially seeing I suppose basically kind of a retread of the US Nationals final. Oh, and he hits the heads off the catcher, and he pulls active the Trubbish. And this could be the last Trubbish. Now he hits the tails on... Or was that heads on roller skates there? I do apologise. He hits a heads on roller skates. It's hard to see from these videos sometimes. And he's going to get the KO on that Trubbish, which puts Scott on a clock. Now, even if Scott pulls that Pikachu active and evolves it into a Raichu, it's only doing 40 damage. And that's not going to be enough. I believe the Pyroar's got 60 on, which means Scott will have to get another bench Pokemon and a Raichu, or a Muscle Band and a Raichu, in order to get the KO there. Even if he does, that Raichu could well end up being killed by the second Pyroar. And then what's Scott actually going to do here? He's going to end up trying to kill these Pyroars using Hypnotoxic Laser. And that's far from a given. These Pyroar decks tend to play a lot of switch cards. And it's going to be hard to get the KOs using just poison here. So Scott really is on the back foot. He's down a prize, and he's running out of options here. If Phil is able to kill this Raichu, and we assume it's going to end up... Oh, he's chorusing for 5. So having put that... playing the Dowsing Machine for the Ultra Ball and then hitting the N and just ending the Ultra Ball back in actually could really pay off for Scott here, because he could draw into an Ultra Ball, which allows him to get a Raichu. But if I'm right in that Pyroar's got 60 damage on, that's not going to get the KO. He needs another bench Pokemon or a Muscle Band, or he's not going to get the KO. And that Pyroar can just discard a Fire Energy, do 110 damage next turn, and still be able to attack. Now Scott does bench the Mewtwo here, but like I've said, yes, that Charizard can be pulled active and killed. Yes, the Mewtwo can be pulled active and killed. And here crucially we do see the Ultra Ball, which allows him to get a Raichu, and he's got a Mewtwo on the bench, which, if my maths is correct, will put the Pyroar up to 120 damage and lead to a KO here. But then that Pyroar on the bench looks like it's got a Fire Energy on it. So all it's going to take is a DCE, and even without a... Oh, and a Bicycle to 4 for Scott here. Even without any kind of Muscle Band, Phil can just discard the Fire Energy off the Pyroar, do 90 to the Raichu, get the KO, and then Scott has no attackers next turn. Nothing he can actually do. So we see he's going to do the 60 damage, he's going to get the KO. And, I mean, there is an argument there that Phil shouldn't have put quite so much energy on the active Pyroar. He could have put a second on the bench Pyroar. But it makes no difference. He's got the DCE. Had Scott not drawn the... Oh, we see a catcher here. But this one comes up tails. Had we not seen the... had we not seen the bench Pokemon and the Raichu from Scott, then putting the extra energy on that active Pyroar would have been the optimum play. So it's certainly not a bad play at all. And we need to bear in mind that Phil is a junior here. Now, you might wonder why there is a stadium there, which is clearly a proxy. This is a Win-A-Box tournament, and we do allow proxies at these tournaments. And the rule basically is, I think it's up to something like 10 proxies per deck. And the reason is, these tournaments are run for the players. They're run for the benefit of all the players. And what we don't want to do here is basically say, oh, you've got to have all the cards. And that might seem a bit counterintuitive. The entire point of these tournaments are, they're put on for the players. They are put on through the kindness of Terry Goodacre and Joe Gledhill and all the people at the Wakefield Pokemon. league, and we want to make them, I say we, I'm not involved in running them, but they want to make them as accessible as they possibly can. So they don't want full decks full of proxies, that gets confusing, but certainly a few proxies here and there is fine. And I cannot see, I'm afraid, but my inkling is that's a tropical beach. That's what we usually see played. And again, we don't really expect juniors to be able to afford these tropical beaches. And, you know, what this allows to do, it allows these juniors to play tropical beach without actually, you know, having to have the tropical beach. And that Raichu goes down. And then Scott's got nothing here. I mean, sure, he can do 30 bench damage to the Mewtwo or the Charizard, but as I started saying earlier, not only does Scott have to have something to draw them active, he's then got to have something to kill them with. Now, bearing in mind there is R2 energy on that Landorus, so in theory he could put a third energy on that Landorus and kill the Charizard or the Mewtwo, but then he still needs to kill the other one. And it looks like Scott's actually going to scoop here. Now this is, I believe, a 50-minute best of 3. And there was a way back in this game for Scott. There was certainly a chance he could win this game. He had lasers, he probably played Lysandra. There were options for Scott to win that game. But we're 15 minutes into a 50-minute best of 3. The chances are Scott isn't actually going to be able... If he pulls out the win, it's going to be a long win. But if he loses, it's going to be a long loss. And the last thing that Scott wants to do is have a really long game where he ends up losing and doesn't actually have enough time to pull out a win in Game 2 or Game 3. Scott's basically... And he's a very good player. He won the National Championships, for goodness sake. So... You know, he clearly knows what he's doing, and he's basically seen that I've already lost one of my Raichu. Let's assume he plays a 2-2 line. That's fairly standard. He's already lost his Garbodor. You know, let's assume he plays a 2-2 line. Yeah, he can potentially catcher. By catcher, I'm referring to any gusting effect. It doesn't have to necessarily be Pokemon catcher. You know, he could maybe use that, and, you know... Yeah, he could maybe do that, and yeah, he's got laser, and yes, he's probably got another 1-1 Raichu line, but really, he's on the back foot. Phil was very much in a driving seat in that last game, and at the end of the day, the best thing to do was scoop, and then try and win games 2 and 3. Now, there may be a small audio blip a second ago. I did have some technical problems, and if I am half a second out with the commentary, I apologise, although truth be told, I'm not saying everything the second it's happening, so you probably won't even notice, but just in case some eagle-eyed viewers out there was a slight technical hitch there, so if I'm ever so slightly out, you will have to forgive that. I shouldn't be, but I'm just warning you now just in case. So in the second game, Scott gets to go first, and this is exactly what he wants. Because there's two things Scott needs here. He wants the early pressure, and bless him, he's got a supporter turn 1 now. This is obviously a huge thing for him, because that's what really put him behind in the previous game. Scott wants the early pressure with Landorus, etc., and he wants to be able to get Garbodor and Raichu out nice and early. Now, he chose not to play the end there. That basically means he's probably got a pretty good hand, stuff he wants to do. Oh, and Phil doesn't have much there, and he's got the Flowstone Garbodor. The other thing is, these Pyroar decks tend to play very few supporters, very few N, and less supporters so they can play more trainer draw. So Scott would have known there that his chances of being end out of his hand were pretty slim. He gets the energy there, and actually you see there Scott's playing a blend energy, so it's more than just kind of a Landorus style deck. There's clearly more there. I would imagine some kind of Cobalion, because again he's got the metals on the same blend energy as that fighting, if I remember correctly. So he gets the Pikachu down, and this time it's Phil who's not drawing particularly well. Although saying that, he's got the Pyro, he's got the DCE, he's got the Muscle Band. What he really needs... Oh, and he's got the Juniper as well. He didn't play a supporter last turn. but he got the Juniper, so he's able to play that here. So he's got some stuff going. This looks like it's going to be a much more interesting, much fairer game. He's already got the Pyroar ready to attack with the Muscle Band. He's played a supporter. He hits heads on a roller skate. But Scott has got the Landorus. He's got the Garbodor down, so he can use the Landorus. He's got the Pikachu down. And when we looked at the US Nationals final, what we really saw with Brandon Salazar's Big Basics deck, the reason why it was able to beat Michael Pramwat's Pyroar deck so handily, was it had Pyroar and, it had Garbodor and it had Raichu. And that's a good thing, because if the Pyroar player goes after the Raichu, you can shut him off with Garbodor. If Pyroar goes after the Garbodor, you can knock him out with Raichu. Now, Phil was able to get some fire energy into that discard pile, and obviously that's key here, because he's able to use Blacksmith, that supporter which allows you to attach 2 fire energy from your discard pile to a fighting Pokemon. It wouldn't work with Mewtwo. Now he's going for another roller skates here, and he's going to hit Tails. I can't actually see what the dice says, but he's not drawing extra cards, so we can assume it's a Tails. Now, the reason Phil's going for that Mewtwo here is very simple. He's got his general plan of, I'm going to lock you out of the game with Pyroar. But he has identified that Scott has got the Garbodor and he's got the Pikachu down. He needs a backup plan, and that's what Mewtwo does. It gives you a backup plan for if you're not actually able to get your ordinary plan off. You can kind of go aggro Mewtwo. Now, Phil has just stuck the Litleo active and given up here. Oh, and we see the laser from Scott. That's going to get the KO on that Litleo. He's doing 50 with the Hammerhead. The laser Burbank will put it up to 80, and that will give a KO here. And he gets the Raichu as well, so Scott's got a really good start here. He's going to be able to get the KO on that Litleo, and with the Garbodor out, he's even going to be able to put 30 on the bench Pyroar through residual damage, and Scott looks to be in the driving seat in this game very, very quickly. And this is what his deck does. Now he's got the Ultra Ball there, he gets rid of a Muscle Band and a Verbank. We know that Phil does play Counter Stadiums, so we hope that Counter Stadiums, we hope he's going to be able to get that Tropical Beach out. And there he gets the Pikachu. Scott knows exactly, and there he's chorusing to 5. Scott knows how this game's going to go. He wants to use his big attackers like Landorus. But, to be honest, he knows he's going to have to take care of the Pyroar, and he knows that the Raichu and the Garbodor are the way to do so. Now, if you're wondering about the blend energy and the basic metal energy, I've told you it's almost certainly due to Cobalion EX, and the reason for that quite simply is Big Basics gets wrecked by TDK. I've talked about this on the podcast, PTCGRadio. You should know that if you're watching this video, but if you don't, you should know from the podcast that TDK has a brilliant matchup against Big Basics, and what that basically means is you need a counter. Scott is clearly preparing for that, and we see he's doing exactly what we thought, except he's putting the 30 on the Mewtwo, because assuming that Garbodor stays out, he's going to be able to kill that Pyroar now without having to put the extra bench damage on, so why would you go for the overkill? It's down to 80 HP, which means that the Hammerhead with one laser will get the KO there. Or indeed, he can use Land's Judgment without discarding energy to get the KO as well. And one of the worst things is TDK basically has the matchup advantage on you. What that means is, you bring out Mewtwo, they kill it with Deoxys. You bring out Landorus, they kill it with Kyurem. So you need to have an answer here. Now, your Mewtwo and their Deoxys are kind of evenly matched, but Kyurem is the big equalizer. Kyurem's really good. You have no good answer to it. It kills your Landorus, and the best thing to kill it with is maybe Raichu, which is weak as wet bread anyway. Or you can kill it with your Mewtwo, but then they bring back their Deoxys. So essentially, Big Basics needs an answer to Kyurem. Cobalion EX comes out. It does 30 or 50 with a Muscle Band, which then times it by 2 with Weakness, which is 60 or 100. Then you can add on the laser damage as well, and it discards a metal energy. So with laser, you can be doing 60, plus then, of course, you got the poison and discarding an energy for 1 energy, or you can even be having a 1-hit KO if you've got a muscle band laser Verbank, because it will do 130. So that's, why Scott's playing that metal energy and the blend energy. So we see here that Phil is halfway through his turn. He's got the counter stadium out there. He's going for the big attack, doing 110, I believe, with the muscle band and discarding the energy. But he knows here that Scott is just an energy away from the KO. Interestingly here, I don't believe a laser will get the KO here, because there's no Verbank out. So that is one thing going in Phil's favour here. But that Garbodor's still out. There's a Raichu on the bench with a DCE. There's a Pikachu on the bench, which is ready to be evolved. And we get the Dowser machine coming down. Could well be going for a laser here, or he could even be going for a Verbank City Gym if he's confident of getting the laser. What we see instead is a Colress, so he's going to Colress to 6. So clearly Scott needed a bunch of stuff here, so rather than just go for the laser and hope to get the KO or go for the Verbank, he's gone for the supporter. And this is what often happens with these Dowser machine plays. You want to use it as a 5th laser, you want to use it as an extra Verbank City Gym or another muscle band, you want to use it as an extra tech trainer card. But the reality is the format that we've got at the moment revolves very much around hitting supporters at the right time, and that's what had to happen here. Scott didn't have a supporter, he needed to hit a supporter, so that's what happened. It's unfortunate, but what can you do? So he is able to get the Hammerhead, he's able to get the residual damage on the Litleo, but crucially here, he's not able to get the KO, which is huge. Now, there is an argument that Scott may have wanted to go for the laser using the Dowser machine had Phil not played the counter stadium, although that then could have been a mistake because he would potentially have drawn dead after that. Although you could say that he had everything he needed. He could have put the DCE on the Mewtwo, got ready for the Mewtwo War, and off we go. But Scott's gone the conservative route here. He could have gone a little bit aggressive, but that wouldn't have worked anyway because he needed the laser and the Verbank to get the KO. So, what's Phil going to do here? He's going to get the KO on that Landorus. That's going to happen, but they're going to be his first 2 prizes. Ooh, what he's got here... Now he's gone for a Pokemon Catcher, and that's a potentially dodgy action if he hits a Tails, but he doesn't hit a Tails. That is an interesting play there. Now he hits a switch, and now Mewtwo's not going to get the KO here. Mewtwo's going to hit for 80, and that Garbodor has a Float Stone attached. That means that he's not actually going to be getting the KO here, and Scott is just going to be able to retreat the Garbodor, so maybe not the best play there. But remember, we are seeing a junior at play here. Not every play is going to be spectacular. Now I believe that's a Float Stone on the Garbodor. If it's not, and it's something like a Muscle Band, then that'll be a spectacular play, but I believe it is a Float Stone there. So, Scott is going to play a Colress 2-5 here. And, having said that, this is only a bad play if Scott hits a DCE. I mean, Scott can attack that Mewtwo with his Landorus and knock it out, but he's going to have to discard a bunch of energy to do so. And that makes his Landorus kind of useless. And it means he's not going to get the residual KO on that benched Pyroar, because that benched Pyroar must be pretty close to dying by now. But that's not going to happen if he uses Land's Judgment. Now we get a Float Stone on a second Trubbish here, because obviously Scott does not want his Garbodor to go down. And we see a laser. That suggests he doesn't have the DCE. If he had the DCE, he'd be able to just KO with the Mewtwo. So he's going to play a bike for 2 here, and he really needs that DCE to get the KO with the Mewtwo. Now, if Scott gets the KO with the Mewtwo, Phil is going to struggle to get the return KO here. But it doesn't look like he's got it, so what does he do? Does he retreat to the Landorus? And I don't believe there are free energy there. The video is quite small. If he doesn't have free energy, he's not going to be able to KO the Mewtwo. And although it was an incredibly gutsy play here, Phil might have actually had a very nice play indeed. Because there's not going to be a KO here. Now, he is going to get the residual KO on the Pyroar, but we are going to see the KO on the Landorus from Phil, using that Mewtwo. Now, Phil is still very much behind here. Scott is ahead in the prizes. I think he's taken 2 prizes, although actually Phil can even up the prizes here. But really, we're not looking at prizes here, we're looking at board state. Phil's got 1 Pyroar down, but the Pyroar's not looking too threatening because Scott's got a Garbodor on the bench and he's got a Trubbish with a Float Stone. Scott's also got a Raichu with a DCE attached and a second Pikachu ready to turn into a Raichu. And Phil's just got that Mewtwo and that Pyroar with no energy. Now what Phil really needs to hit here is he really needs to hit a Blacksmith to start building up another Pyroar. Now, crucially, he does hit heads on another catcher, and Phil's having good luck with the catchers here. And he's able to KO the Garbodor. But the KO is going to come from the Raichu here, and that is going to leave Phil with just a single Pyroar. And that's not a good thing. Because as soon as a second Garbodor comes down, then Phil's going to have very, very little at play here. So we see a bicycle for a couple from Scott, and that's going to be big. But it looks like he's got this game in control. This looks like one of those games where the conclusion is kind of foregone at this stage. It looks like it would take a lot for Phil to pull out the win here. But Phil's not going to scoop. Why would he scoop? He won game 1. Best case scenario here, we run out of time. Scott hasn't got the win yet. And then Phil is going to pull out the win. Even if Scott does win game 2, and that looks pretty likely, Scott's a favourite in this matchup. We've talked about this on the podcast. Scott has a favourable matchup. So Phil wants to basically turn this into game 3, go for as long as he can, make sure game 3 doesn't finish, and then it's going to go to a draw, and that's going to suit both of them quite nicely indeed. So Phil gets that Charizard down, and that's important because that Pyroar, if it went down, was going to actually lose him the game. The downside is that if Phil is running a fairly standard Pyroar list, and we have every reason to believe that he is, that means that he's probably only playing 1 Mewtwo. So he's not going to be able to Mewtwo all this up. Now he does hit the Blacksmith. Does he have a third energy? And I can't see from his hand whether he does or not. Now he needs to have the third energy, and he needs to have some kind of catcher. Oh, and he doesn't, and Scott hits the switch. He brings his Raichu active, and that Raichu's going to be doing 80 damage, which I believe will be enough for the KO. And there's a Skylar there, just in case it's not. Now I can't see how much is on the Pyroar. It might not be 30. Pyroar, remember, has 110 HP. That Raichu is currently hitting for 80, so if there's 30 damage on that active Pyroar, then that Raichu's going to be doing enough for the KO. If there isn't, he's not quite getting it. But Scott plays a Skylar, and if there isn't, we assume he's going for another bench Pokemon, or he's going for a Muscle Band, or maybe even a Laser here. But the chances are, I think he has got the KO there. So it depends, and he's going for the Lysandra, and we can see exactly what he's doing here. Now, he's not playing the Lysandra, he can't. He's just stuck 2 DCEs on his Mewtwo. What Scott is going for here is the I am going to catch her up and kill your, or Lysandra up and kill your Charizard. So he piles energy on the Mewtwo, he's got the Lysandra, and as I've already said, these Pyroar decks don't tend to play many end cards, so the chances of Phil being able to get rid of that Lysandra are quite slim. We've also said that Phil is likely to be playing a single Mewtwo. Scott knows this, Scott is aware of the metagame, so that means that it's unlikely that that Mewtwo's actually going to go down. Now, here's what's basically going to happen in this game. Either that Charizard is going to be active with a bunch of damage, in comes Mewtwo, or Phil is going to bench some. Oh, we see a Blacksmith there. He gets Charizard going in one turn. He's going to get the KO. Disappointingly, however, if he uses a big attack for 150, Charizard isn't able to use that attack next turn. Now, as it turns out, Phil hasn't benched anything else. If he had, we'd get a Lysandra for the KO. But as it turns out here, Mewtwo comes up and has got the energy. Now, that last play from Scott was quite important there. What Scott was basically doing was guaranteeing himself the game. He knew that that Pyroar was going to go down, and Phil was going to be left with just one Charizard. So, and Scott also knew that Phil was unlikely to be playing many ends, so if he played Skylar for a Lysandra, he was likely to have it the following turn. And what he was basically putting himself in a position to do was either bring up that Mewtwo to kill the Charizard, or if Phil benched something else, then Scott could just Lysandra up the thing on the bench and kill it with the Mewtwo. So Scott there making a very clever play, being able to get the KO on whatever. Now, one thing I want to point out while we're between games here, Phil is a junior, and this is the final round of this Win-A-Box tournament. There were a fair few players, somewhere in the region of about 30. This was maybe even more than that, to be honest. It was quite a good turnout. And we have mixed age divisions in these Win-A-Box tournaments. What that means is that juniors can choose to play. They can have their own side tournament if they want, or they can choose to play with the Masters. These were the top 2 seeds going into round 5. I believe Phil is 3-0-1 or maybe 3-1, and Scott is again 3-0-1, something like that. So we were talking about the top 2 players at the tournament going into the final round, and Phil has not just played against juniors and seniors here. So yeah, I'm showing you a junior, but I'm not showing you a junior playing here as some kind of side attraction. I'm showing you a junior who's got a good deck and has played it well and has got himself into, you know, the top 2 going into the final round of Swiss. And both of these players, regardless of the result, are going to end up in the top 8. That's going to happen. So although I wanted to show you this game as a kind of juniors doing really well and 2 interesting decks and all of that, both these players have already booked their way in top 8 through the first 4 rounds, and all this game is really doing is affecting the seeding, and that's important to note here. So we are going into game 3. We're 1 game apiece. Crucially here, Phil is able to go first, but Scott again looks like he's getting a very good start. He's got a Trubbish with a Float Stone. He's got a Landorus with an Energy. And he's got a Level Ball to either get a Pikachu or a Trubbish. Now, my inkling here would be to get a Trubbish, because Raichu is less reliable than Garbodor. If you can get 2 Garbodor out, it's hard to kill both of them, and then you can be hitting away with your Landorus and your Mewtwo. We've seen that Phil plays Catcher. He doesn't appear to play, and he does play a Lysandra, so we have seen one of them, but Catcher's unreliable. Whereas if Scott just goes for Pikachu, they're much more easily killed, and then he's got nothing. So, you know, Garbodor is better than Raichu in this matchup. And Scott agrees with me, he's gone for the Trubbish, and there we see a Juniper. Annoyingly with only 3 cards in hand, so he wasn't able to play that Ultra Ball to get a Pikachu as well. Now, you'll notice we're about 40 minutes into this 15-minute best of 3. We are going to be running late here. We're running kind of deep into the game. We could be running into a draw, or somebody could be getting a quick win. As I've said, Scott is the favourite here, not because he's a master, not because he's a national champion, but because all things being even and all people drawing equal, we should be seeing Big Basics beat Pyroar. As I've explained before, if he just plays Garbodor, they can be captured and killed. If he just plays Raichu, they can be captured and killed. But the combination of all of them will usually allow a Big Basics deck to overpower a Pyroar deck. And although he hasn't got the we can't get it, he's only on turn 1. That is a hell of a turn 1. He's got the Landorus active and attacking. He's got 2 Trubbish and a Pikachu on the bench. And he's got a Floatstone on one of the Pikachu. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is huge straight away here. That is really, really good. So, we see an N there from Phil on turn 1, on his second turn. And what he really wants here is a Blacksmith. But Blacksmith's a supporter. He's not going to hit a Blacksmith after already playing the N. Now, Charizard does have a Littler attack, doing 60 for 3 damage. And that's not the end of the world, but he would have to get a Muscle Band and a Laser in order to get the KO. And these Pyroar decks don't generally play Laser, and I don't remember seeing Phil play Lasers throughout. So he's not... The point of this story is he's not going to get a 2-hit KO on that Landorus with Charizard. But he does get an energy. I suppose what he'd be looking to do, if he can hit for 60 here, then... Actually, he really needs a Muscle Band here as well. Because if he can hit for 80, then Pyroar can come in and hit for 90 with a Muscle Band, which would be 110 and get the KO. If he can only hit for 60, then Pyroar hits for a maximum, and he gets the Muscle Band. So again, Phil's thinking the same thing as me here. If Charizard only hits for 60, Pyroar can hit for a maximum of 110, and that's not going to KO the Landorus. But if Charizard can hit for 80, he could then switch into a Pyroar with a Muscle Band, hit for 110, and get the KO. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself here. You know, there's still a lot to ask. He doesn't have a Pyroar on the bench. He doesn't have any energy on there. But that would be one play. Of course, what Phil really wants here is not to kill the Landorus. The Landorus isn't really a threat unless a Garbodor comes out. What Phil really wanted in that last turn was to get a catcher, to catcher up the Trubbish with the Floatstone and get the KO. That didn't happen. Scott's got the Garbodor out. And again, we're seeing exactly what we saw in Game 2. Scott's deck should win. And that's what we're seeing here. We've clearly got 2 very good players with very good decks. And in those situations, sometimes it comes down to particular plays, sometimes it comes down to luck. But in the format we've got at the moment, it very often comes down to matchups. And unfortunately, Phil is on the wrong end of this matchup. It's not a very good matchup for him. Now, the good news is at the moment that Charizard's active. That Charizard is a pretty good damage sponge. And those Litleos have got 70 HP, so the Litleos ain't dying at the moment. Those Litleos aren't going to go down. At least from residual bench damage. The problem is he needs to evolve it next turn, or that one Litleo is going to die. Now, what Scott could even consider doing here is putting 30 damage on each Litleo in order to get an easier KO with Raichu. Raichu can one-hit a Pyroar, but in order for a Raichu to one-hit KO a Pyroar, it needs a full bench and it needs a Muscle Band. You bring Pyroar down to 80 HP using residual damage from Lance Judgment, and you can do it with 4 benched Pokemon or 3 benched Pokemon and a Muscle Band, and that's much easier. Scott, however, is choosing to go the other route and just try and get the KO from the bench damage. And now this puts Phil on a clock. If he can't evolve the Pyroar, then Scott's going to basically get a free KO next turn. And that's going to be very nice for him. And it's really, the Pyroar's going to be the only thing that wins Phil this matchup. At the end of the day, I mean, it's really going to come down to the fact of, you know, can Phil block him with the Pyroar? If Phil is relying entirely on Charizard and Mewtwo, Scott's going to win. But And the question is he... Oh, and he gets another energy there. So he is, if he wants, going to be able to get the KO on the Landorus, although he won't be able to use the big attack next turn if he does. And that's actually going to stop that Litleo being killed from residual damage next turn in the event that he's unable to get a Pyroar out. So he gets the KO. He's not going to be able to use that big attack next turn. And what that does is it saves the Litleo. And I'm still a fan here. I would much rather have seen 30 damage on each of the Litleos here. Because what that would have allowed is, like I say, it would have led to a much easier Raichu KO. Now, Raichu has free retreat. So what Scott can do here is pop down a Landorus with an energy. And then just kill the Litleo on the bench anyway with residual damage. But that's a fair amount to ask for. Now that Raichu is actually not going to go down next turn. Charizard's big attack doesn't allow you to use it 2 turns in a row. The little attack does 60, add the 20 for the muscle band does 80, and Raichu has 90 HP. So that Raichu is likely to survive a turn, although obviously what Phil's going to be going for here is switch into the Pyroar and get a KO with the Pyroar. Or maybe even Mewtwo DC Muscle Band, although again that's quite a lot to ask for. And it would allow Scott to get the KO with his own Mewtwo if that were to happen. Now I can't see how much damage that Charizard has got on it. I believe it's 60 from 2, and it must be 60 because it's 1 dice. And Raichu's only doing 60 damage here. So that Charizard, it's living another day. And an energy goes on the Litleo. Obviously it's going to go on the Litleo that's got no damage on it. You want it to survive. And it looks like there is an Ultra Ball there. Interestingly, he's chosen to get rid of the catcher rather than to play the catcher. Oh, but he needed to do so in order to... Yeah, what he was doing there, he was clearing out his hand in order that he could bicycle to 4. And if he played the catcher and hit a Tails, then not only would he not be able to use the Ultra Ball, but he also would have been able to draw less cards from the bicycle. So I see what he did there. That was a pretty nice play. Had he hit the heads, he actually would have got the free KO on the Trubbish, because he would have been able to do 80 to it. But again, you're relying on hitting heads. He's gone for the conservative play, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Now the question is, does Phil really have anything here? Now we are getting very close to time being called. But I don't believe it's been called yet. I will try and determine from the video when it is called, but I've turned the audio off, so we'll have to kind of guess. And unfortunately, without anything else to do, Phil has just had to pass. Now that laser's not really doing anything here, because Scott's doing 60 damage, and that Charizard's got 120 HP on it anyway. So presumably, Scott's going to play some kind of Juniper here. Yeah, we go, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine Scott would be someone who would just go ahead and just plain waste a Juniper. So, seriously, waste a laser. So yeah, it makes sense that Juniper was going to come down. Because he's getting the KO regardless of the laser. The laser didn't need to be played. So... again, it looks like Scott is in the driving seat here. Now, Phil's got a half-decent board. That Charizard's going to go down, but he's just a DCE away from getting his Pyroar up and running, and then he's going to be able to get the KO on the Raichu, and, go down to 3 prizes, which I believe they're on 4 each at the moment. The problem is here, what's he going to do next? Because that Garbodor is still out. And he gets the KO, and it looks like Phil's got very little in his hand. Because there's not really anything to do here. The Garbodor's out. Landorus is hitting nicely. Oh, and now we do see a laser. And that's going to do 30 damage. It looks like there is a muscle band on... Oh, and he gets a second Garbodor out with a second Float Stone. And that's probably sealed the game here for Scott. But again, we're running short on time. And that is why Scott is junipering away a bunch of supporters. Scott knows he's in the driving seat here. One of 2 things is going to happen. Time is going to be called and it's going to end up in a draw. Or Scott is going to be able to take a bunch of prizes really quickly and get the win. So he's able to get the Landorus out. He's going to be doing 80 damage here, including poison. I'm assuming that's a... there we go, yes, so it is 80 damage. That Pyroar is going to die coming back into Scott's turn, and that's pretty much going to be the game. Well, it is going to be the game, unless Phil can bench something else. Even if he can bench something else, and then he plays a Juniper to search for another Pokemon, all that's going to happen here is the Pyroar's going to die going into Scott's turn, and anything that Phil benches here, Scott's going to likely be able to kill next turn anyway. Now, I believe time is called around here, but it's largely irrelevant, because all Scott's going to need is one laser to get the KO next turn and actually win the game. Now, he's only doing... Oh, no. Yes. So what's going to happen here is the Pyroar's going to die of poison in between turns, and Scott's just going to need a laser to get the KO next turn. Even bearing in mind that time's been called, Scott is going to be able to get the win here. It's not been called, it's just about to be called. And Scott is going to end up getting the win here. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. I think it's cool to see, a junior hanging with, the masters, taking a best of... And there's the laser for the win. He's taken this game all the way to, time in a best of 3, taking a game off him. This is the last video I recorded at the Wakefield Win-A-Box, but I've got some videos from a league challenge which will be coming up in the near future. Make sure you like, subscribe and all of that good stuff, and I'll be back soon with more videos.